The most dangerous cruise charges are not always the expensive ones you choose on purpose. They are the tiny ones you never saw coming. A drink you thought was included, a room service order that felt harmless, a bag with something you didn't know was restricted, a quick tap of your cruise card that didn't feel like spending real money at all. And then, on the final morning, you open your onboard account and suddenly realize the ship has been quietly keeping score the entire time. Here's the part most first-time cruisers don't understand. Cruise ships have rules everywhere, but not all of them are explained clearly when you book. Some are buried in fine print. Some are mentioned once during boarding, and some are simply understood by experienced cruisers. But if you miss them, even by accident, small mistakes can turn into charges that feel completely unfair. And wait until we get to the last one, because that's the rule many passengers only learn after their final bill is already locked in. Mistake 1. The rule about restricted items that feels unfair until you pay for it. It usually starts before you even step onto the ship. You're packing at home, trying to be smart. Maybe you slip a bottle into your luggage. Maybe it's a small appliance, something you've used in hotels before without any issue. Maybe it's just something that feels completely normal, something you've never once been told is a problem. And in your mind, it makes sense. You've paid for the cruise, it's your cabin, why would this be a big deal? But here's what most people don't realize. Cruise ships don't operate like hotels. They operate under a completely different system of safety, control, and onboard revenue. And because of that, the definition of restricted is much broader than what you expect. Your bag gets scanned before boarding, not quickly, not casually, thoroughly. And if something even slightly questionable shows up, it doesn't matter whether you intended to break a rule or not. That item can be confiscated, delayed, or flagged. Now here's where the hidden cost begins. Sometimes you won't even know right away. Your luggage simply doesn't arrive with the rest. Hours later, you get a notice. You're asked to visit a specific desk. You wait in line. And then you're told your item has been held. In some cases, you can get it back at the end of the cruise. In others, you might have to pay a handling fee, or worse, the item is discarded entirely. And if it's something tied to safety concerns, you could even receive a warning that follows your onboard profile. It feels small. It feels like a technicality. But that one moment, that one assumption of, this should be fine, can quietly turn into your first unexpected charge before your vacation even begins. Experienced cruisers know this rule isn't really about the item itself. It's about control. The ship decides what enters, what gets used, and what gets monetized. And if you don't know that going in, you're already playing by rules you never agreed to. Mistake 2. The free food rule that quietly charges you anyway. It usually happens on the second or third day. You're already comfortable, you've explored the ship, you've seen the buffet, the dining room, the cafes, and somewhere along the way, you start to relax into the idea that food is just included. So one night, you decide to stay in. You scroll through the room service menu. It feels simple, easy, convenient. You tap a few items. Maybe it's late, maybe you're tired, maybe you just don't feel like going out again. And in your mind, this is still part of what you paid for. But here's the hidden rule most people miss. On many cruises, it's not the food that costs you. It's everything around it. A delivery fee quietly appears. A service charge gets added automatically. Some items that look normal are actually marked as premium without being obvious. And suddenly, that quick, casual order becomes something you never planned to pay for. It doesn't feel like a big deal in the moment. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. But here's what makes it dangerous. There's no friction, no real pause, no moment where you feel like you're spending money. You're not handing over cash, You're not swiping a card in a physical way. You're just tapping a screen inside your cabin. And that's exactly how the system is designed. Because when the act of paying disappears, your awareness disappears with it. By the time most people realize what's happening, it's not one order anymore. It's multiple nights, multiple small decisions, all stacked quietly in the background. And when they finally look at the total, it doesn't feel like they ordered anything extravagant. It just feels like the cruise slowly started charging them for something they thought was already included. Mistake 3. The cruise card rule that makes money disappear without you noticing. It never feels like spending. That's the problem. You walk into a cafe, grab a coffee, tap your cruise card. No total flashes in front of you, no receipt you really look at. Just a quick confirmation and you move on. Later, maybe a cocktail by the pool. Tap again. Then a snack, a dessert, a bottle of water during a show. Tap. Tap, tap. And at no point does it feel like you're actually paying for anything. That's because cruise ships removed the most important moment in spending. The moment of hesitation. When you hand over cash, you feel it. When you swipe a credit card, you at least see the number. But when everything is tied to a small plastic card that works instantly, your brain stops registering the cost in real time. This is not accidental. The entire onboard system is built to reduce friction. The easier it is to spend, the less you think about each decision. And when each decision feels insignificant, you stop tracking them altogether. Here's where the hidden rule comes in. You're expected to monitor your spending daily. Not at the end, not when it's convenient. Every single day. But almost no first-time cruisers do that. They assume the total will somehow make sense later. They assume they'll remember what they spent. They assume the system will alert them if something gets too high. It doesn't. There is no warning when your total starts climbing. No pause. No limit unless you manually set one. So by the time you finally open your account, maybe on the last night, you're not looking at one decision. You're looking at dozens of small, invisible ones that added up without ever asking for your attention. And that's when people say the same thing. I didn't feel like I was spending that much. Because you weren't feeling it. That was the rule. Mistake 4. The daily charges rule that builds a bill without asking you. Most people don't notice it on the first day. There's too much happening. Boarding, exploring, unpacking, getting familiar with the ship. You're focused on the experience, not the details. And somewhere in the background, your onboard account quietly starts updating. No alerts, no interruption, just numbers changing. By the second day, it's still easy to ignore. Nothing feels wrong. You haven't made any big purchases. You haven't booked anything expensive. Everything feels controlled. But here's the hidden rule. Some of the most consistent charges on a cruise are not tied to what you actively choose. They are applied automatically, every single day. Gratuities, service fees, daily charges that are pre-programmed into your account the moment you step on board. And the system assumes you understand this. It assumes you know where to check. It assumes you know how much is being added. It assumes you'll review it regularly. But most people don't. Not because they don't care, but because nothing prompts them to. There's no moment that forces you to stop and look. So the charges keep stacking. A few dollars per person per day. It doesn't sound serious. It doesn't feel urgent. But over 5, 7, 10 days across 2 or 3 people, the number grows into something you would have definitely noticed if it had been shown to you all at once. And that's the trick. When costs are spread out over time, they feel smaller than they actually are. By the time you finally see the full amount, it doesn't feel like something you chose. It feels like something that just happened. And technically, it did. Because the rule was never about whether you agreed. It was about whether you were paying attention. Mistake 5. The unwritten rules that change how you're charged. This is the part almost no one explains clearly, because these rules are not printed in bold. They're not announced over speakers, and they're definitely not highlighted when you book your cruise. You only notice them when something feels off. Maybe it's your second or third day. You go back to the same bar, order the same drink, but somehow the total is slightly different. You request something simple, something that felt normal yesterday. But today, there's a small extra charge attached. Or you realize someone next to you is getting better service, faster responses, even small perks you didn't know existed. And you start wondering, what changed? The answer is nothing obvious. You didn't break a clear rule. You didn't do anything extreme, but you unknowingly stepped outside the expected behavior of how things work on a cruise. This is where the unwritten rules come in. On a cruise, there are systems that react to how you use services. Timing matters. Ordering patterns matter. How you interact with staff matters more than people think. Even things like not confirming certain details or assuming something is included without asking can shift how charges are applied or how services are delivered. And the ship doesn't stop you. It doesn't correct you in the moment. It simply adjusts in the background. Maybe a drink is categorized differently. Maybe a service is processed in a way that includes a fee. Maybe something that could have been avoided isn't. To you, it feels inconsistent. To the system, it's completely normal. Because these rules are designed for people who already know them, experienced cruisers move differently. They ask specific questions. They confirm small details before ordering. They know exactly how to phrase requests so there are no assumptions. But if you don't know that language, you're relying on guesses. And guesses are where hidden charges begin. By the time you realize something was off, it's already processed, already added, already part of your final total. No warning, no reversal. Just a quiet reminder that on a cruise, not knowing the rules doesn't protect you from the cost. What all these rules really do to your final bill. Individually, none of these mistakes feel serious. A small fee here, a minor charge there. Something that seems too insignificant to worry about in the moment. And that's exactly why they work so well together. Because no single decision triggers concern. But over the course of an entire cruise, these small, unnoticed moments start stacking in the background. Day after day. Tap after tap. Order after order. Until what felt like a controlled, reasonable trip turns into a total that feels disconnected from your experience. And that's when people feel confused, not because they spent wildly, but because they never felt like they were spending at all. The real takeaway isn't to stop enjoying the cruise. It's to understand how the system works before it starts working on you. To check your account daily. To question anything that feels even slightly unclear. To treat every small decision like it matters, because on a cruise, it does. So here's the question most people never ask until it's too late. If these small choices can quietly build into a big bill, how many of them are happening right now without you noticing? If this made you think differently about how cruise spending really works, then the next video is going to take this even further. Because there's one specific cruise mistake that looks smart, feels smart, but ends up costing more than almost anything else on board. And most people never see it coming. Subscribe now and make sure you don't miss it.